we looked at how our bodies receive data through neuroreception and how our intuition outruns even the most complex logical models. But the language of the body is vast, and the hunch is only one frequency. Feedback often hits as a burning sensation, a heavy surge of energy when we realize that we've violated our own internal standards. This is the frequency of shame. Traditional grind culture offers a few ways to fail at this moment. First is the stoic robot approach, where we're told to just kill the feeling and stay flat. Second is the toxic pride, where we believe that if we don't punish ourselves for our mistakes, we aren't tough enough to improve. And then there are those who shield themselves from responsibility entirely and project their pain onto the environment or other players. Integrated excellence requires us to reject all of the above. The sensation of shame is a high-gain error signal. It's an evolutionary, functional mechanism, but not a penance to be celebrated. Using that signal to flagellate ourselves is not discipline. We're just crashing the system. Today, we move beyond getting over it and into high-resolution recalibration. We're going to define the mechanics of the neural burn, dismantle the simulation loops that keep us stuck in the past, and learn how to use that data to finally close the loop on failure. We function as goal-directed systems. At the heart of our hardware is a feedback loop. We take an action, observe the result, and compare it against a reference value, our internal law of how things should be. Our brain manages this through a mechanism called the comparator. The comparator sits between our intent and our action as an internal auditor. When we realize we've made a mistake, like calling off a stack when our logic dictated a fold, the comparator detects a gap between our law and our reality. Since we are biological systems, this audit doesn't arrive as a cold data point. As soon as the gap is detected, our system alerts us with a high-intensity surge of neural burn. This error signal is visceral because our ancestors relied on social cohesion for survival. Research by Dr. Naomi Eisenberger shows that the anterior insula, that's the part of the brain that processes physical pain, is the exact same area that lights up when we experience failure. Our body doesn't distinguish between a broken bone and the broken law of our own conduct. The intensity of this signal is a direct reflection of how much we value the law that we just broke. In any elite environment, we tend to set the reference value at near perfection. We leave no margin for human variance, effectively building a brittle system. Since there is no buffer zone in our logic, even the smallest mistake can trigger a high-intensity error signal as if it were a total system collapse. Our anterior insula runs its ancient survival code and doesn't differentiate between a minor strategic error and a catastrophic status drop. It generates a surge that saturates our processors and makes it incredibly difficult to respond to the data while we're bracing for the impact of our own internal judgment. The primary cause of our systemic drag is signal regeneration. In nature, the error signal has a half-life. It arrives, it informs, and as the context changes, it decays. As analytical thinkers and solver users, we have developed the dangerous ability to save to disk. We take a single point of failure and run it through a continuous simulation loop. Every time we obsessively reanalyze a river call at 3 a.m., we're re-triggering the sensor. We're not only remembering the event, we are re-simulating the deviation from our laws in high definition. We're manually holding the comparator open, forcing the system to generate the neural burn again and again. We handle this persistence poorly because we mistake the intensity of the signal for the value of the data. Often we've extracted the lesson in the first 5 seconds, and the rest is only systemic noise, a constant echo that prevents us from moving into the next moment with absolute clarity. To break this loop, we have to recognize when the audit has turned into a simulation. We must learn to acknowledge the data and terminate the process. When the simulation loop is flooded by persistent signal, we reach systemic saturation. We run out of the cognitive resources required to convert the neural burn into a usable strategy. At this breaking point, our architecture defaults to one of two primary failure modes. The projector responds with loop decoupling. To stop the pain, the mind cuts the wire between our action and the result. We assign the error to the environment, bad luck, or an incompetent opponent. This is a move toward what Norbert Wiener defined as an open loop system. While this stops the discomfort, it leaves us flying a drone with a disconnected GPS. We might feel safe because the mistake is no longer ours, yet we are drifting toward a total loss of control. We have discarded the feedback required for recalibration. The martyr responds with implosion, fueling the toxic pride cycle. When we cannot execute a retroactive correction because the hand is already over, our system reflexively increases the gain of the signal. This is called recursive error looping. In control theory, it is also known as oscillatory instability. As Dr. George Ainsley explores in his research on pains of the mind, we try to prepay for future successes with current suffering. Without a termination command, our feedback loop amplifies its own alarm until the system loses coherence. This is mistake tilt in its purest form. We think we are being hardcore professionals by flagellating ourselves, yet what we are experiencing is a mechanical failure of our internal comparator. In an earlier session, we performed an autopsy on the stoic robot and saw how its strategy of suppression is just as ineffective. Whether we are welding the safety valve shut like the robot, cutting the wire like the projector, or amping the volume like the martyr, the result is the same. We've lost the ability to process reality. True excellence requires that we see that error signal as high voltage fuel and not as a reason for system failure. Exiting systemic saturation is not about calming down. Calming down is often just another term for suppression. If we want to really close the loop on failure, we have to address the heat of the neural burn directly. The shame we feel after a high-profile punt, that heavy, sickening heat in the chest, is a real somatic event. Our anterior insula is signaling a catastrophic drop in status. It feels like social death because, for our ancestors, being the weak link meant being cast out of the tribe. When we are in signal saturation, we lose our capacity for high-resolution thought. If we try to study our ranges while drowning in the shame of yesterday's session, we're just vibrating in place. We aren't learning. We are resimulating our own humiliation. Research by Dr. James Gross at Stanford on cognitive reappraisal provides us the cooling system we need. We don't try to stop shame. We identify it as the high voltage energy required for high resolution recalibration. We move from the recursive, how could I be so stupid, to a tactical professional extraction. Number one, acknowledge the signal. We stop fighting the heat. We acknowledge the shame as proof that our internal law of excellence was violated. It is a sign of our integrity, not our inadequacy. By accepting the sensation as a high-gain data stream, we stop the simulation loop from regenerating the neural burn. We aren't being emotional. We're reading a sensor. Number two, isolate the law. We get surgical with our architecture. We ask, what specific law did I break? Was it a failure of knowledge, where we played a strategy we didn't understand? Or was it a failure of execution, where our logic was hijacked by the survival code of our anterior insula? By naming the law, for example, I traded my logic for the hope of looking tough, We move the error from our identity to our architecture. 3. The termination command. In cybernetics, a signal must be terminated once the data is extracted. We commit to a specific systemic adjustment, not a promise to do better, but a concrete change in the code. We signal to the brain, data extracted, law updated, process terminated. This clears the cache so we can take the seat with a fluid, high resolution presence, free from ghosts of hands that we played an hour ago. We cannot apply a generic fix to a specific mechanical failure. The projector and the martyr move in opposite directions away from the data, so our professional extraction must be tuned to bring each back to center. When we project, we move toward an open loop system. The signal is disconnected from the internal law because we have assigned the error to the environment. To resolve this, the extraction must focus on ownership of the law. We don't ask what happened with the cards. We ask, regardless of the variance, which of our internal laws did we allow to be compromised? By reclaiming the error as internal, we reestablish the connection. We stop the drift by plugging the GPS back into the system. The martyr suffers from systemic saturation. The signal is so loud, it has become noise. The neural burn is no longer providing data, it's just consuming power. For the martyr, our extraction acts as a high-pass filter. We acknowledge the heat as proof of our standards, and then we immediately pivot to the termination command. We recognize that the debt to our excellence is paid the moment we update the code, not when our suffering hits a certain threshold. We kill the noise to save the processor. The mechanics of the neural burn are not restricted to the felt. Whether we are navigating a high-stakes business negotiation, managing a complex team, or maintaining our closest relationships, we always operate as the same goal-directed system. In a professional context, we often mistake the burn for a signal of incompetence. Whether it's a failed venture, a missed market opportunity, or a messed up meeting, we let the simulation loop run until we hit systemic saturation. The comparator doesn't distinguish between a strategic error in a spreadsheet and a tactical error in a hand. In both environments, the heat is simply the hardware signaling that our internal law of excellence has been breached. If we can apply professional extraction to a poker table, we can apply it to a boardroom. The beauty of cybernetics is that its concepts apply to our hardware regardless of the source of the data. The Anterior Insula doesn't care if we punt it at the poker table or we punt it in a conversation that ended up hurting someone we care about. In both cases, the sickening heat in the chest feels identical. Most people spend their lives either drowning in the noise of self-flagellation or becoming robots to avoid the pain. As architects of our own lives, we have a third option. We can stand in the burn, extract the data, and recalibrate. We don't clear the cache to forget. We clear the cache so we can move into the next moment with more precision and more humanity than the one before. In the end, poker is just a microcosm. The real great work is the conscious calibration of the self.